Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show, our May Day edition. I am Santita Jackson. This is AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. We're streaming on the Santita Jackson YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson YouTube channel. We've had so much traction. Facebook reached out to me and asked me to move you over from Facebook over to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. So would you please do that? And please like and subscribe to us there and click that bell so that whenever we come up live, you will be able to be notified. Okay. But if you are like an old head like me, go to Facebook and meet me over there and become my friend on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. That's the only place where I can have some activity. And I'm so glad to have you here today. We've got Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, the family here. I think that's what I'm going to start calling everybody. Attorney Terry O'Neill, the former national president of the National Organization of Women, Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, and Dwight McKee, and Minister Cameron Barnes, and Ariel Gold, and Josh Feinstein. We are welcoming a new member of our family here, Allison Brown. I'm so excited that you are here with us on this special May Day edition. But as we've communicated with each other, we're looking at and you're in law, you're a paralegal. Um, we're looking at these students. We're looking at so much activity in America and the world right now. It's amazing. We've seen UAW have this historic strike, and we're seeing more and more unions have these big wins. But I'm also conscious of this fact, and I know Dwight can elaborate on this very specifically, as can you, Attorney Terry O'Neill, having headed the massive organization that you've headed, and you too, Ariel. The role that these unions have paid in have played in the liberation struggle. And one cannot help but think, and I've been reading just some whisperings of what it would mean for these young people to have the involvement of unions, to get their support, because that's going to mean so much. Because these unions they're us, they're parents. They are. And no rumors. I don't have any children, but just spiritually, I'm a parent. And that's the generation behind me and the generation behind them. And so you tell me, what does May Day, what is it about? And what is the relevance of unions today, particularly in this heightened social, I mean, we've got social, political, and cultural. Um, when I say upheaval, I mean it in a good way. I mean, everything's changing, Allison. Everything. Welcome to the show, my dear
Well,
Allison.
thank you for having me. And it really is great to meet all of you. I really hope to get to know you all a bit more over the next months, years, who knows. You've given me a lot to work with there, Santita. I think that I guess to start, I'll just sort of lay out like what legal aid is, because I didn't really know a lot about the profession before coming into it. And I think by talking about that, we might be able to tease out some of the ways that the work that we've been doing, the organizing that we've been doing, is plugged into and has historically been plugged into all of these struggles. And the way that being involved in these labor struggles, I think, can give people who are maybe disillusioned with the sort of standard democratic process with like just vote, et cetera, to have some degree of exercise of political power in a space of their lives, their workplace. And I think that it's a chance for people to experience what democracy really looks like, to crib from the protest chant. I think that that's where I'm coming from with this, is there's a bit of a sea change happening within the labor movement itself, with these sort of reform caucuses, and we actually are part of, it's always a little thing. we're the ULW, United Legal Workers of Chicago, which is the unit assigned to legal aid Chicago. And then that's part of our national local, which is the NOLSW, the National Organization of Legal Services Workers. And there are chapters at all of these different legal aid firms across the country. And then we're actually a part of, you mentioned the UAW, we are part of the UAW. So we will vote for, Sean Fain is our president. It doesn't feel like it's sort of a surreal disconnect because it's not like but we got people from UAW 551, some of the auto plant workers, including one of the steering committee chairs of UAWD, the Reform Caucus, Scott Holdison, I believe, came out to our practice picket a couple weeks ago. And it's really gone to show for myself the value of this solidarity that can, not be really apparent when you're just, working at your desk working with your clients. But as soon as you put out the call, then suddenly a friend in the union is like, I have someone who I know who does a radio show out of Minneapolis and also online, and they'd love to speak to you about these issues.
Well, I mean, I think it's important because one of the things that I saw Attorney Terry O'Neill do so beautifully and what you do with your work with the Fellowship of Reconciliation, Ariel, is intersectionality. I mean, what they have done so brilliantly is help us to understand the intersectionality of all of these movements. I mean, because when I hear you talk about legal aid, I'm thinking about these young people. They suspended all these kids at Columbia, today, and so Columbia is one of these $100,000 a year schools. So most of these kids who are at these schools, whether they're state schools or the Ivies or the near Ivies, the new Ivies and all that, they cannot afford to be there. And they might need legal assistance. When I think about it, when you're looking at suspensions and things like that, I mean, do you touch upon that?
So we don't primarily work on cases like that. We do have the folks who work at the National Lawyers Guild, I think, are the best for that sort of representation. And a lot of what we're doing, as with many legal services providers, is kind of getting people to the right number to call for them to be able to help with their issue. I think that what you're bringing up, though, has a role within the organization a little bit, because a lot of these legal aid providers are also in some ways legal training pipelines for like the profession of law. A lot of the paralegals that I work with are in between their undergraduate and going likely to some form of graduate school. And a lot of the attorneys who come to work for legal aid will be coming out of some fellowship. Sometimes that they pay for their salary too, which can create complications in the bargaining process. But overall, it's really interesting as a labor struggle, because it is so embedded in like this identity of being a professional in training, which doesn't always kind of jive with the idea of being a worker and being under the boot like a worker would be. You're not supposed to be the person who's having trouble. You're supposed to be a good Samaritan helping out other people these are programs that were originally developed in the late 60s, early 70s as part of the war on poverty in the Great Society. So these are, anti-poverty programs that are intended to serve the marginalized communities that we're often talking about when we talk about intersectionality. And really, in my opinion, it helps me refocus both by doing the work that I'm doing and also just in thinking about activism. It helps me refocus away from like these individual success or failure stories of people within certain identity groups. It helps refocus on the classes, the masses of people who are being, dispossessed or screwed over, for lack of a better term, by the powers that be. And
Well, I mean, Allison, because I don't care whether it's a gender issue, a racial issue, a weight issue, because I mean, it's just, it can be so many things. If you're living under the boot of oppression, you're living under the boot of oppression, right?
absolutely.
And at the end of the day, when you take the 40,000 foot view, everybody, that's what it comes. If you've been shamed and blamed, doesn't make you feel great.
And I think that that's an opportunity that I've started to understand better about the role that I'm in. And I think
Mhm.
the way that this client to professional relationship is executed is a lot of the people on the other side of the phone, I work with veterans who are trying to get their public benefits in particular. So
Mhm.
veterans disability claims, things like that. Um, when something goes wrong, and in particular, I think people in benefits have seen a lot of these overpayments cases where the government tries to claw back money and stuff like that. You see a lot of it's very bureaucratized and normal looking, so people don't even think this is a thing that I could challenge. This is a legal issue. They're like, I guess I just got to pay this bill now. And so I think it's a really powerful thing to give some people the agency, I guess, to say, no, I want to make a claim that this is a violation of my rights, or I want to claim disability benefits based on trauma that I experienced, maybe by serving in the military. And I think the populations that we're serving are often governed top down and sort of managed as populations rather than treated as individual subjects with political rights, which they should be, because legal services are so inaccessible. And
Mhm.
so that's something that we have a lot of power in doing, but it's buried under a lot of the just weight of how much unfortunately, our services are in a high demand because there are a lot of
Mhm.
people who are having trouble and who need assistance.
Well, I mean, how can we get in touch with you? Because, like you said, you point people in the directions. You point people in the directions where they need to go.
Sure. I mean, if you want the number for the Veterans Rights Project, that is 312-347-8340. And that'll just go to an email to our hotline inbox, and we will basically take a look at those and see, are they in our priorities, is the technical term, and are basically, is it a case that we're able to take, that the lawyers will tell me okay, we can work with this person for a longer amount of time, or is it something where it's we don't have that specialization, but we have these numbers or these other more do it yourself options.
It's interesting, Dwight, because we're a lot of what we see the protest about Allison and Josh and Terry O'Neill and Ariel and Minister Barnes and Reverend Dr. Yuri when he gets back. This is really over the military. It's but it's like one of the things that Dr. King was railing against. He and my father were walking, and several other staff members were walking him to a plane, obviously many years ago, and he saw, I think, a white and a black soldier who were on their way to Vietnam. And they came up to him and they wanted to know why he didn't like them, why he was not supporting them. He said, "Oh, sons, but I am. I don't want to see you thrown away. I don't want you to you're fighting to get people rights that you don't even have here." And this, I mean, and we, because it's far too often, I mean, we don't respect people's rights, and we continue to throw away, Dwight, the most vulnerable. And that's what I see with these students. Because we heard in the last hour, many of them, a couple of the students who we had, Attorney O'Neill and Ariel Goldie, they said, "I don't know if I'm going to pursue a degree beyond this bachelor's, because uh, this has just been such this has been such a negative experience for me. I don't even know. And for graduate school, you have to be interviewed. And in this politicized environment, I mean, it's a lot. I mean, Dwight, where do you see the nexus between legal aid and unions and just the times that we're living in as we're looking at these young people who are fighting. Dwight?
Well, you have to understand that it's one struggle because it's basically, one oppressor. Is that I was thinking a little while ago that America, the reason we have such problems making adjustments on Israel is because America is really a tributary of Israel rather than Israel being a tributary of America. The same people that set up Israel are the same people that set up America. The Rothschilds is who set up Israel. They also who has the primary ownership in U.S. Steel and General Electric and set up the Federal Reserve, and they control this economy and the politics of this economy. And so when you talk about the unions, they're fighting to get the benefits of their work for a U.S. Steel or General Electric. They're fighting against the same people that we're fighting with, who controls the Israeli economy and who controls the South African economy. It was the Rothschilds family that controlled the diamond mines and who funded Cecil Rhodes in South Africa. And so it's really one struggle because it's not a lot of oppressors. They just have a lot of control. And these, couple of families, these 200 families that control the world's economy and control 95% of the world's economy, is they set this thing up hundreds of years ago. And so what we're doing is we're fighting the remnant of a system that's been set up for 300, 400 years. Same family that funded the American Revolution, the Rothschilds funded World War II and World War One. And so it's the same struggle because it's the same oppression. It's just different variations and different dimensions of it.
Mm. I guess right now I'm trying to find out, when I think about the veterans, I just see a lot of I see unions growing in strength because really they were dealt a death blow. Well, what could have been a death blow by Ronald Reagan when he fired a whole class of workers, as we remember in 1981, when he
Air
fired
traffic
all of
controllers.
the
Air
controllers,
traffic controllers, yeah.
which was
Yeah.
like, you
That was
know,
interesting.
but you're beginning to see vulnerable people fight back. You're beginning to see, I can't help but think of Trinice in the last hour. She's a student at FAMU, and the administration at FAMU has told this young activist, you know what? We get a lot of funding. Divesting from Israel, we're never going to do. There's too much of our endowment is tied up in that. You got Colombia that said the same thing. And, before we make Israel the red herring, I mean, the fact is we're invested in war. um, we're just invested. I mean, I think these kids see Terry O'Neill and Ariel and Minister Barnes and Reverend Dr. Yuri, that we're invested in the wrong things. And we're invested in things that they're like, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. And when I came to Columbia and NYU and Northwestern, I did not know you were making your money off of war. I mean, I'm not anti-military at all, but I don't want to send them on these. We don't even pay our enlistees, Allison. I mean, you got payday loan centers on the edges of these bases. I mean, they're struggling too.
Yeah, I guess I really want to push back a little bit on the specific sort of singling out of any family in this situation, because so much of it is just about I like what Michael Brooks used to say, which is be gentle to people and ruthless to systems. And I think that exposure to the legal aid field is really helpful for that, because you see it how it's like policy that gets set in place that reproduces these systems of oppression, regardless of whether there's a bad faith actor in the driver's seat or not. A lot of times there is, but there doesn't need to be. It's still an oppressive system.
Well said, Edson. Well
Do you
said.
think-
But it's the people that set the systems up, and they set the systems up to protect their own financial interest.
Sure.
And so you can't separate the people from the systems, because that's how these systems are created. They're set up to protect their interests at the expense of everybody else.
Well, I guess I think the challenge right now is that now, because we have to be careful with the Rothschilds because they are Jewish, and many people said, oh, okay, they control the world, and you're not looking at and I'm not saying you're doing this right, but we're not looking at Bezos, who's made his money off of huge government contracts, or Gates, or even the largest landowner on earth, which is King Charles.
Well, that's why I said 200 families, about 200
absolutely.
families. I didn't make it Rothschild specific. I said these families control 90% of the economy.
Yeah.
And you can't get around that.
Yeah,
I guess we're saying Rothschild is probably not the ideal. Rothschild, although they're part of that conglomerate, they're probably not the ideal example to point out. Interesting, Dwight, when you said, I'll tell you who's behind it all, Israel, the United States, I thought you were going to say Great Britain, because, the way they set up the thousand I thought, but I think where Allison's coming from is, and I think we're all on the same page here. It's just that there is a certain amount of conglomeration of the powerful, but I think with everything going on, and believe me, again, where I stand on all the issues. I think one thing we do want to be mindful of is that calling out a specific family, especially, again, I know what the Rothschilds are, I know what they're about, but they are just one of, as Dwight was saying, many, 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 many. So
it is a group of them, and I think our young people have to know, as we're watching them fight Allison, as we're watching them fight Ariel, and Attorney O'Neill, and Minister Barnes, who they're fighting. What, not who, but what.
I want to bring in the text that I was recently reading that I feel like is helpful here. Was Malcolm Harris's book Palo Alto, on the history of Stanford in particular, but that area in general, and how it became this hub, among other things, of military Keynesianism, and the idea that you would be priming the economic pump by making sure that there is always spending happening, repeatedly authorized by Congress, the same way that our funding, the Legal Services Corporation, funds us. They have to pass these bills like the one they just passed, and that gives a certain amount of people jobs. And that's the hard thing, is that there are tens of thousands of people. This has been the backbone. I used to live in San Diego, and it's really apparent there because it's the hub for the Pacific Naval Fleet. That under the surface of all of what's happening in the United States is this reliance on, like Dwight D. Eisenhower said, the military-industrial complex.
And I think when we see these kids at all of these colleges, Ariel, when they're talking about divestment, they need to know what they're asking the universities to unlock. Right. I'm not saying that they don't, but they've gone from high school to the real world.
Yeah, this is the real belly of the beast. And I want to even point that Israel's actually a small player. Without the US, they're nothing. In fact, they, really they're managing to carry out
what we want them
the
to
most
do.
horrific genocide of our time. But that's because of the US, and that's because of the US weapons companies. We look at Lockheed Martin, the largest weapons manufacturer in the world, and we look at Boeing, and most of that is consolidated in the US. Of course, there's some in Britain, some in France, some in Germany, but the largest is the US, and the US weapons industry is connected with Britain, France, Germany, and Israel's weapons companies as well. And that's what's so inspiring to me about this moment is the Palestinian struggle has become symbolic and representing so much more, right? So much, it's representing both Palestinian liberation and so much beyond that. So
What do
much
you mean? What do you mean
beyond
by
that.
so much beyond
I
that?
think that's why so many different groups of people, whether it's for LGBTQ plus rights or it's racial justice, have gravitated towards this issue because this has become an issue that as we tackle it, we're actually tackling oppression and occupation and repression on a much, much larger scale. And that struggle for justice is monstrous. And so as these students who are incredibly brave and brilliant, as they are looking to divest by attaching this to the weapons industry, they're creating probably the largest anti-war movement that we've seen since Vietnam.
Wow.
And that looks at the system underneath, because you could look just at a smaller group of companies profiting from or contributing to Israel's settlement industry, directly to the occupation, like Caterpillar, some of the IT, but by looking at the entire weapons industry, but by demanding that, they are providing an opportunity to really transform our society from militarism, from being driven by the profiteering of death. Merchants of death are what these companies are, and trying to root that out. And yeah, that's going to be huge, because that's such a huge source of money and of power.
Attorney O'Neill, I see you itching to jump in here.
You're on mute, Terry.
All of this brilliance muted.
Exactly. Yeah, Santita, I think, I've been having all these thoughts listening to all of this. First of all, I think what the students certainly at Columbia are asking for is so minimal. It is such a normal thing that any democracy should be willing to acknowledge and provide. And that is, you divest from countries that are behaving in anti-democratic ways, the way Israel under Netanyahu for over 20 years has step by step stopped being a democracy. Israel's not a democracy. They claim they are not. The state of Tennessee, where I live, not a democracy. Tennessee does not allow most Black people in this state to vote. They're by race. People are second-class citizens here. That's also happening in Israel under Netanyahu and has been for the past 20 years. That's a problem. So you divest from that as a means of pressuring Israel to move back towards democracy and respect for human rights and civil rights of everyone under their jurisdiction. So that seems to me to be a very reasonable demand. Secondly, financial transparency. Columbia should certainly be financially transparent about its investments and the kinds of endeavors that it supports with its billions and billions of dollars that they have. All these Ivy League schools have enormous endowments. And third, they want amnesty. I don't think that's asking too much. Students who are expressing themselves, who are struggling to understand larger things that are going on in the world, who are not 45 years old or 55 years old or 65 years old, who don't have that kind of the wisdom of the years. These are people who are working very, very hard to make a difference in a positive way. They absolutely should have amnesty. So the things that they're asking for at Columbia, it seems to me, are just more than reasonable.
But do you think they're going to get the amnesty? I mean, a suspension from college is a real serious thing. And I do hope it's interim, but and then I think about the interview process for graduate school. This will come up.
Exactly. And this is why amnesty is so important and really to me is not, that should be a no-brainer for Columbia to be willing to provide amnesty for that. What I want to do is connect those demands and the encampments that the students are doing right now. I want to connect that up with union organizing. People complain a lot about both millennials and Gen Z. They don't join. They don't join bowling leagues. They don't join churches. They don't join unions. They don't, they're not joiners. They're off on their social media. It's very individualized. They have inherited the extreme radical individualization of neoliberalism, which is a very frankly unhealthy thing for them to have. So that's a problem. But union organizing is all about not just joining something, but internal democracy, developing the discipline of going to meetings, of hashing out your ideas, of internal compromise, coming to a position statement. All of those things take work, and it takes the ability to maintain the relationship within an organization like a union, like a coalition of nonprofit organizations, for example. It takes a willingness to remain in relationship even as you disagree and you're not getting this. That is incredible discipline that I think is extremely important for this age group, to be putting them through. And finally,
well, hold on one second. Do you think that because COVID hit us like we were broadsided by that?
Yes.
Do you think that? Well, I mean, what are you seeing with these young people? I mean, you see, Allison, with all due respect, sweetie, you are young. You're one of the youngins here. You're the youngest. You and Cameron, Minister Bowringel, the babies here. You see them. You see Allison looking to pull people together.
Yes.
You see, and you all are both under 30. Allison. I know it's okay. It's all right. My child. You see them working. You see them working to working in coalition. I mean, it's like, and they appear to be unbreakable.
Well, let's hope, and let's hope that this time around, as we rebuild unions, we are very conscious of making sure that unions, the solidarity of unions is broader, and as you said, Santita, more intersectional than it has ever been in the past. Let's not forget that the unions of the 1930s and 40s were extremely racist. They excluded African-American workers. They were misogynist. They insisted on rigidly defined gender roles for workers, which are really basically unhealthy. So we need an intersectional approach within unionization to make it truly a what's the word I want to say? An essential part of a healthy democracy.
Because we're seeing what Reverend Dr. Yuri, because this is, I mean, and I think that's having these demonstrations in our face every day are making us think about that. I mean, because we just came off of that UAW strike, which was huge. And you were frightened to death that, whoa, I mean, how's this going to disrupt our lives, because workers can shut things down, but we're seeing that students can shut things down too. I mean, the last can truly be first. But why were you nodding so vigorously in assent to what Attorney O'Neill was saying?
Well, because Terry O'Neill is right. So that's the first thing. It's pretty easy. But the other part is that when we celebrate International Workers' Day, when we talk about the importance of labor and organized labor, we have to make sure that we don't become so nostalgic that we lose the clarity of making sure that we make labor participation more inclusive. That's what Terry was just pushing on. That what we have seen, we cannot lose sight of the history of the labor movement, just like folks are losing sight about the issues that are happening in Gaza and the history of the conflict between the Palestinians and the state of Israel, even before there was a formal state of Israel. We cannot lose sight of the fact that as these young people are protesting across the country, that the civil rights movement was largely a youth movement. And even as Terry was talking, right? If we want to get biblical, and this is where my good friend Joshua will keep me straight at the beginning, when we talk about the deliverance of the children of Israel, that was a labor movement. Moses organized labor to say, we the laborers are out of here. And so when we consider youth movements, when we consider labor movements, they have always been to push the capacity of our awareness of justice to be more inclusive than just the myopia of our own needs. And so if we don't have the intersectionality that Terry is talking about, if we don't recognize that it's a youth movement, even when we talk within Christianity, after Jesus quotes his Bible verse at 12 years old, he starts his movement at the age of 30 and dies at age 33. Justice movements are by and large and historically have been youth-led movements. And if we don't encourage them to stay engaged, and even as we're talking about the labor movement, the labor marketplace is aging downward. The fact that we have such low unemployment rates, they're trying to rewrite labor laws, child labor laws, to get folks in the labor market sooner, because we have a capacity issue. We have a supply and demand issue. We have an immigration issue that is driven by the fact that we create an alternative labor market that doesn't come with the protections of wages and health care and security, that then kind of further fuels this kind of asinine drive to bring folks through, and then we blame the workers for wanting to come where the demand is high and the supply is limited. And so as we're talking about International Workers' Day, May Day, we have to understand that it has always been a labor market push that has led to some of the most horrific injustices, i.e. plantation slavery and an agricultural economy where we got to go get free labor. The biggest cost in a production-based economy is labor. And so if we don't keep that in mind, we lose sight of the fact that where we have this moment, this opportunity to talk about those issues, all of those things intersect into all of the other issues that we are looking at, how we built a middle class around labor, but that middle class took a while to get there to some of the communities. And so we have to be very aware of not only the opportunity, but the history that informs not only where we've been, but it helps us to set a trajectory about where we're going.
Reverend Dr. Uri, before I pivot to you, Josh, and to you, Cameron Barnes, what do you think what can be the takeaway? I'm so glad to see someone so young, Allison, like you, involved in this space, because you don't have to be. And because that's another shift that we're seeing, Terry and Ariel and Josh and Dwight. We're seeing these young people move into these spaces, and they're reforming them and making them right. Allison has not given up on labor. Allison has said, "Oh, okay, no. I see what the issues are. People, legal aid. No, this is how we can help you. There is help out here for you." What can they teach? What can Allison teach these young people who are out here? They're going to these wonderful schools. They never expected to face suspension. I'm sure they did not walk in September and August, Ariel, thinking that they would be living in encampments by the spring.
Here they are.
And wrestling with this and rolling in the grass with the president and the president of the university and the board of trustees. Welcome to the big leagues. They were just in high school last year.
With all due respect, I think that I'm learning more from the people that I am working with and from these students than I have anything to teach them. The younger people. What am I learning? I mean, I know people now from this work who, because they get drawn, people who work in this work also often have connections to social movement organizations. We used a former Sunrise template for our practice picket run of show. And that was because we had someone who is also a paralegal who I struck up a friendship with, who was able to bring those skills from that experience, which people are having younger and younger because the planet is dying and nobody keeps doing anything about it. And so, or with regards to the Black Lives Matter and George Floyd history, these are people have grown up with knowing that the world is bullshit and that this is not.
Everyone loves that term on my show. Okay.
Sorry. But that '08 financial crisis happened, Trump happened, all of the things that were supposed to be like the destinies of the 21st century did not pan out how people said they were going to. The American dream turned into our parents owning homes that get wealthier and will never own a home. And it just is, I think that the most fascinating thing has been people's realization that unions are a space that you can sort of seize and make work in a way that it feels like these other movements like tech platforms have been co-opted, other older movements, you know, Acorn got destroyed, like, et cetera, et cetera. So it's cool to see like people going back and being like, what about the labor stuff? Maybe they had maybe that was a good like leverage point. And I just briefly, I wanted to also say that the expansion of the different intersectional analyses that you're bringing are also very helpful for understanding choke points that didn't maybe get as much credit before because they were part of like social reproduction instead of production. And so that's been, I just feel like I learned from the diversity of my colleagues, and I am hoping that that's what a new labor movement and a new anti-war movement can bring for people, is learning from each other and breaking down these barriers and maybe getting each other to trust one another. Because people are like, what are you doing? Are you trying to be nice to me? That's not, are you trying to like advocate on my behalf? That's crazy. Nobody does that.
Mm-hmm. But you know what? I mean, Josh, but I you know, Allison, no, but you're not over talking. Baby, you're doing just fine. You're doing great. Josh, I mean, but I see us, we have talked about this so often, particularly since we're on camera now. We didn't know each other 5 minutes ago. But now we expect to hear from each other just about every day. Right? Yeah. And if I don't, are you okay? You know, I mean, I think one of the upsides of this upheaval is that we are really coming together, and we're having to look past a lot of stuff.
Yes.
To come together. I mean, I'm sure there were some people you did not know before you were in the uncommitted movement.
Yes. It's so many important things were said today. I think the way that Dwight and Ariel and Allison framed in terms of how things fit together with military industrial complex and labor. The first thing that comes to mind is we always talk about uncommitted. We always talk with every bomb that's dropped, someone makes money. Right. And I think the first part of the show, it was framed up very well. And then Terry and Yuri very eloquently talked about, okay, this is the state of things now. And when I was listening, I was thinking, so those of us who are not that young, what should we be doing? And I'm very practical. The answer is very simple. There are over 100 encampments now, and by these wonderful young people. And although they're not yet joining unions, there's two things. One, we can go out and actually support them. You go online, you find out what supplies do they need. You go there, you bring the supplies, and essentially then you are adding and helping to support the movement. That's one. Two, Terry, I'm happy to say that here in Detroit, the DSA is very robust, the Democratic Social, and it is very robust. And I'll tell you, most of the people, I've joined it. I'm a member, and I'm a very proud member. The reason I joined it is there's so much youthful energy. It spans all ages, but there's so much youthful energy there, and they are very tied into the movement. So just to sum up, after I was listening to everything, I was thinking, so what do we do next? I think it's very practical. When you get off the show, I ask your listeners to go online, look at where is the nearest encampment to them, figure out what supplies they need, and based on your own means, what can you go? Maybe you just go there to support physically. I know there's a lot of people. It's being here in Michigan. They actually get a lot of good Lebanese and Middle Eastern food cooked for them. So that's quite nice.
I'm moving out there with you and Ariel. I mean, come on.
New York and New Jersey too.
So
with those kids.
I want it right now. So look, I'm loving it. And before I come to you, I mean, wow, you got me salivating, because that's like some favorite food. I'm a foodie. Yes, I am. Ariel, what did you?
Yeah.
You just shot me a message.
Well, I was talking about what's happening at City University of New York, which is a public college, and they're more in need of support because these are students that are not as wealthy as, say, the students at Columbia. Actually, Fellowship of Reconciliation and Arab American Institute together tomorrow, we are delivering lunch from Basha's restaurant in Paterson, New Jersey. Nationally renowned Palestinian food, delivering lunch to them. And, you know, folks, if you can only afford a little, you can donate to organizations like Fellowship of Reconciliation and Arab American Institute, because we and friends of ours are, you know, have launched a campaign to feed these students who are pursuing justice. But, you know, what's happening at CUNY, and this goes back to labor, is, and the students have an order to dismantle by tomorrow morning. So we're going to see what takes place. But hundreds of the union there, the staff and faculty, the workers at the university, voted today to protect the students and support their 5 demands for amnesty and divestment, and to form a picket line of protection for these students. Wow. And so, you know, whether these students succeed is not only up to them, but it's also up to us. And it's up to us, you know, kind of the older folk, right? What can we do to see that they aren't starved out? So at CUNY, they have closed the food pantry because a number of the students rely on the food pantry. So they're trying to starve them out there. They're also trying to starve them out at Columbia, where they have tried to lock down the entire campus and not let any food or water. And we may see them try to turn off the water and electricity, which is an old, tired tactic of the empire to undermine protest movements. But we have these tools in our toolbox, and some of those tools are labor. You know, it's thanks to tenure that professors that have been able to form protective lines and protect some of these students, including at Columbia. So we have to hold tight to all of the tools and opportunities and skill sets that we have, so that we are coming together united, because we are going up against a beast of a monster, right? Again, this isn't just Israel. It isn't just the Biden administration.
It's not.
It's
so beyond all of that.
War machine, and it's monstrous. Right. And so we need everything we've got. And right now, these kids are on the front lines. And so how do we support them and protect them and see that they have the fuel, the food and the water that they need to do this, and the protection from their professors and from their unions?
We are peeling an onion. And I think that is what, you know, we have to look at that. We are peeling an onion. You know, you're beginning to see who Israel is in the world, who they are to us, but you're seeing Britain. I mean, they're smooth and they hide their hand, but they are at the center of all of this mischief. They really are. I've got about 8 minutes left, and I want Josh, I want you to say something, but I haven't heard from Minister Barnes, but please.
No, just the protests in the UK have been very encouraging. I agree that in terms of the history of it, yeah. Anyway, I want to cede my time because there's so many great speakers on today.
But I mean, because when you get to London, I mean, they are rolling. You are rolling in the grass in London, but I'm like, yeah, we ought to be, because you're at the center of all this mischief here. So much of colonialism. The city of London is where all the money is. The city of Vatican. Dwight said this many years ago. City of the Vatican, religious authority. Even if you are Buddhist or Jewish or Protestant, you got to kiss that ring. The military complex, that's District of Columbia. And we are beginning to see all of that. 2 minutes for you, Minister. Minister Barnes? Yeah.
Oh, there were so many ministers there. I didn't know.
No.
Which is what. But, you know, this has just been great for me, particularly as maybe arguably one of the youngest on the call, to just kind of take all of this in. And especially, I didn't expect to get this from some of the people that I've been with and studied under, obviously Reverend Yeary and Terry O'Neill, and I even went through Ohio and Kentucky together, traveling, and Dwight McKee and so on and so forth. But I think that it certainly need to be lifted up. Something that Ariel said that mentioned, but for the tenure, some of these college professors would not be able. I was looking at one of those articles where faculty and staff kind of created a picket around the encampment and even around the entrance and different things. And I thought to myself, if the students are being retaliated against and are even fearful, how are the professors able to do this? And then being on this call allows me to even polish and refine these ideas and these skills even more, and then gives me the fuel to be able to go back to the folks like Trinice and Tumar and these young people that I'm in contact with that are in the midst of encampments as we speak, getting off the show to go back to an encampment tonight and even in the morning. This gives us the fuel to be able to talk about how unions can support this movement. And it's something that my peers and myself may miss because we just don't know the historical context. For many of these young people, this is their first time participating in any kind of demonstration at all. But they're so passionate about it that they will let nothing stop them. But of course, we have to then be informed in doing so that this is how we're able to do this with the support of the union. Many of them not even thinking about a union. They don't even have jobs, let alone joining unions, as Terry mentioned during the first part of this show. But the how these connect to each other is so very important. And I'm grateful to be learning this, to be able to take this back to these students so that we can fight effectively. We can protest effectively. We can demonstrate effectively, and not so much just for spur of the moment, if you will.
Well, but that's why I have panels, because so many of us don't know each other. And there's power in numbers. And when you look around at who's here, you see, wow, I have an ally. Because if you look at corporate media, Allison, you would think that you are alone and you are out of your mind. Because these are some dangerous kids who are doing something very, very dangerous. And what's dangerous, not to me, is dangerous to the oligarchs. It's dangerous to the establishment, because what I want to help them to do is to dismantle this injustice. I mean, Allison, it's May Day, International Workers' Day. The final word belongs to you. The last 2 minutes.
No pressure. I guess I wanted to focus on the fact that this is International Workers' Day. And I think that the fact that we don't celebrate International Workers' Day in the United States officially is a policy choice that has, from 1894, I looked this up last night because I sent out an email, like a newsletter to our unit. In 1894, Grover Cleveland was basically trying to cover for some labor disaster that had happened, and was like, we need to pick a Labor Day. We should not do May Day, because then it'll get associated with the socialists and the anarchists, and they'll get too much legitimacy from it. So when I think of International Workers' Day, when I think of May Day, I think of the fact that your work, your labor, is and has always been political. And the fact that that has been tried to people, the powers that be, especially for the past 50 years, give or take, have tried to suppress that fact and move on. When I grew up, my parents, who were Reagan Democrat types, were talked about unions in the past tense. They were like, a union was when you and this was how this sort of union busting narrative became the de facto self-fulfilling prophecy of that period of neoliberalism, like Terry was speaking to earlier. And I think that it's so key to take that international perspective to see the structural exploitation that's happening of the global South by the global North, and how, what's happening in Israel, Palestine is a microcosm of what is happening you know, in the cities of America, in the international world order, so on and so forth, in your workplace. Like how, and it's just a matter of finding how what you're doing plugs into this broader struggle, which is what these students understand.
Well, you know, and they do. And as you can see, as you said, in that era, labor was. As we've grown up, we've been hearing, well, back in the civil rights days, movements are not over, they continue, everybody. And these kids and union workers and laborers all over the world, they're showing us that. We have workers on both coasts of the United States who are not taking Israeli products in support of the Palestinian people. They're not against Israel. They're not against Israelis. They're against injustice. And we have to make sure that we make that distinction, everybody. This is about Israeli security and Palestinian justice. We have been told in the Bible that lions and lambs have to lie down together. That is just real. Be very clear. Your enemy is yourself. You have a seat at the table in the presence of your enemy because your enemy is God's child too. We are locked into each other. Let's be clear on that. So happy International Workers' Day. International Workers' Day. We are one, everybody. We're one world. And may God bless these students and the laborers of the world, which is what they're trying to become. Let God bless these students. And if you just go by the encampment and tell them that you love them and that you support them, that will mean so much. That will mean so much. Many of these kids are not at home. It'll mean so much. They're not alone, and we have to let them know that they're not alone. Sending you so much love today on the